Hi, I'm Robin Austin, and today I'm going to be talking about a small skirmish of the American Revolution that took place in Beaufort, North Carolina. On October 1871, Lord Cornwallis had surrendered the British troops. The American Revolution had, for all intents and purposes, come to an end. But while terms were being discussed, the British Navy roamed the South Carolina coast for supplies, usually between Charleston and Savannah. On April 4th, 1782, four British ships entered the inlet to Beaufort, North Carolina, not Beaufort, South Carolina, that had been invaded the month before. And the shallow inlet brought the ships in, and the ships would usually come in either bringing supplies or there to pick up supplies. And the sailors would take the rowboats and row them into shore. But on this day, the ships came in and they just sat there. So several of the townspeople rowed out to meet them, and they didn't come back. So on the early hours of April 5th, the British finally came ashore and they captured and plundered the small town of Beaufort. Initially, small militia came in, they drove the militia away, and there were several skirmishes in Beaufort in which one British sailor died, several were wounded, and others taken prisoner. And the British had prisoners on their ships from the Beaufort people who had rowed out. So finally, on April 17th, they exchanged prisoners and the British left. And then in November of the same year, the Articles of Peace were written for the American Revolution and they were signed. The skirmish in Beaufort didn't change the history of the American Revolution, but it is believed to be the final skirmish of the war. Now, Beaufort is the third oldest town in North Carolina, and it was founded in 1709. As well as the history of this skirmish, the town has wonderful stories of history as well as historic sites, historic homes, and docent-led tours on the historic site of several buildings. Several homes date back to the Revolutionary War within the town, and two can be toured on the site. The Leffers Cottage, circa 1778, was the home of Samuel Leffers, who was from New York City, and he was the first schoolmaster and clerk of court for the town of Beaufort. The Maddie King Davis Art Gallery is housed in a home of the American Revolution era and is the oldest art gallery in the county. Two other private homes were the Manson and Bell homes, which are still on their original foundations on the site, and both have plaques dated 1825, but the original part of the Bell house was built in the late 1700s. And the Bell house is decorated in a French Rococo Victorian period. The Manson house is decorated in the Federalist period. The site also has three public buildings. It has the third oldest wooden courthouse in the state, and it has a jail that was used until the 1950s without any indoor plumbing or anything like that. And the apothecary dates back all the way to the Civil War. Beaufort is also home to an old burying ground, and the grave sites in the old burying ground date back to 1711 with the remains of settlers from the Tuscarora Indian Wars. And there are many interesting stories of other people that are buried in here. One of them is a British naval officer who requested to be buried standing up so that he would be saluting King George III. Beaufort Inlet is also home to the watery grave of Blackbeard's ships, the Queen Anne's Revenge, and artifacts from the ship can be seen in the Maritime Museum that's right there in Beaufort. One final note, 55 years after the British skirmish, a fort was built to defend the Beaufort Inlet. Interestingly enough, the cannons were placed that they could only fire on the inlet. And because of this, General Burnside was able to bring the Union Army into Beaufort through the land side and basically took over Beaufort for most of the Civil War as well as the fort. And while Beaufort, North Carolina has a small part in the history of the American Revolution, it's a town full of history and a great place for historical research and to go and visit.